there's a single aspect of lifestyle within personal development that truly is the epitome of the Pareto principle. It's truly the 20% of inputs that renders 80% of the outputs. And you might be wondering, wait, is it sleep? Is it exercising, bodybuilding, getting a pump in the gym? Maybe it's cold approaching attractive women. And all of the aforementioned are really important pillars in their own right, but none of them are the most fundamental, foundational pillar that is the highest leverage maneuver, which is nutrition, food, the things that you consume that touch your tongue, teeth, and lips, the things that you digest, the nutrition, the nutrients, both micro and macro, the things that make you what you are, is absolutely, bar none, no holds barred, the most vital aspect of maximizing, truly supercharging your self-actualization journey. And I'm about to literally take you by the hand, as long as you promise to stop getting cute in the kitchen, because this is what a lot of people fall prey to. Foodies just decorating their food and just really getting cute with their nutrition, with their food. I'm going to show you my masculine approach to food preparation. This is literally the only meal that you'll ever need to master in your life. And the cookware will run you about $100 one-time fee, which, by the way, is portable. I'm about to show you the exact way to prepare a testosterone-boosting food with ideal macronutrients and micronutrients to not only maximize your endocrine system, longevity, sleep, but also one that is incredibly within reach, incredibly affordable. I have a video on my channel about how to actually shop, how to actually procure in the grocery store the things that I'll be using in this video today to prepare my meal, and that costs about $80 per week, just over $10 per day. So sit back, relax, and let me show you the way. Let me show you the diet that I use to gain over 25 pounds of muscle, to reverse a rare disease called eosinophilic esophagitis, to no longer have to contend with the consequences of exercise-induced asthma, allergic rhinitis, just all of these allergies to dust mites, pollen, cat dander. The list goes on and on. I don't have any of these medical problems anymore, and I don't want you to either. Just approaching my fridge here and getting prepared. The idea with meal preparation is efficiency. Everything needs to be deliberate. You really want to grease the groove, so to speak, of the process. I'm a big fan of being methodical. Every step in the sequence is deliberate. I'm a big fan of whole milk. I'm just pouring myself a full glass here. This glass is about 600 milliliters, and that just happens to be exactly 1/14 of my weekly milk consumption. I drink 2 whole gallons of milk every single week, and I divvy that up into 14 servings, which is the number of meals that I consume per week, which is 2 meals per day. This is just something that I like to do. I like to chill it in the freezer, so that's one of the first steps that you'll see here is I'm just pouring out the amount of milk that I want to drink, drinking a little bit of it so it doesn't overflow, and then putting the remainder for my meal in the freezer. Right here, getting a little bit of frozen raw beef liver. That's for my copper consumption. It's a B vitamin blast, and I see it as nature's multivitamin to cover my bases. Right here, you can see some basmati rice, and that is 135 grams measured raw. Just to preface, this is my meal prep for an isocaloric diet. That's one in which I'm consuming as many calories as I am ostensibly expending. At least in my estimation, it's my best approximation. The basmati rice there was just soaking in water for about 12 hours. I eat approximately every 12 hours, just 2 meals a day, maximally spaced for 2 sort of mini fasts, you might say. And what I do is I have a pre-allocated amount of water, distilled water, pure H2O, that I have measured out. And for my particular setup, which you'll just have to tailor and fine tune based off of empirical evidence, just based off of your own experiences, your own trials and tribulations, just trial and error, I've just found that about 350 grams of water is the perfect amount to render perfectly cooked beef, rice, and a hard-boiled egg. So that's what the Instant Pot is going to be cooking here. You're seeing that I just prepared my red meat, and I grabbed opposite ends of the meat in case my cuts weren't perfectly in half. It's about half a pound that I put in the Instant Pot. I prefer cooking on low pressure to minimize heat and, by extension, oxidation of the cholesterol both in the hard-boiled egg that I eat with each meal and with the red meat. Now what I'm using is silicone packaging as opposed to plastic, and I'm just going to, in that airtight silicone container, I'm just going to lock that up and put that in my fridge for my second meal of the day. This just happens to be breakfast. Here, what you can see that I'm using is a citric acid 3% spray. And then as a rinse, I actually use distilled water, which you might be concerned is a little bit wasteful, but I use it at a high pressure stream, and just that bottle there will last for several weeks. So you can see here I'm transporting the beef back into the fridge, and the Instant Pot at this point is actually ready to rock and roll. So you can see that actually did not take that long. I have a preset option on the Instant Pot, which is low pressure for 6 minutes. Sometimes I'll use 5 minutes, 5 or 6 minutes. And what I'm doing here is actually prepping for the next meal. So I'm actually weighing out the amount of rice that I then want to add distilled water to soak in between this time and the next time that I'm going to be doing my next meal preparation. So I'm simply using a gram scale and then transporting that basmati rice into the container that I'm then going to add water to for soaking purposes. You can see over there in the corner, that is my source of distilled water there, that glass collector, and that is the collection vessel for my vapor distiller. It's made by a company called Mega Home, and I'm a huge fan of these guys. This thing is freaking bulletproof. I use it actually twice per day, not only for my own drinking water, but I've actually got a housemate right now who also drinks that water. So I run it in the morning and also overnight. So you can see I'm just soaking the basmati rice right now, and I'm really just waiting for the Instant Pot to get up to temperature. And once it does, it's going to be 6 minutes from that point. So it's closer to, say, 12 or 13 minutes of total cook time from the time that you start it to the time that it's ready to have the pressure released. Here I'm using an app, an equation that I built in to calculate the amount of time for distillation, the amount of time that I need to set the wall timer to right here, which in this case just happens to be about 4.25 hours to top off the glass collection, because I figured that it takes 5.25 hours, 5.25 hours to completely distill a gallon of water. It's closer to 1.1 gallons for that glass collection. And so what I did was I derived an equation that can actually calculate the amount of time to set it to when I don't have an empty vessel to distill into, which is often the case. You might need to do a partial distillation just to top it off. And that calculation, just make sure that I am always maxing out the glass collection without overflowing it and then without undershooting. What I'm doing here is I'm tossing and washing 1 tablespoon of beef gelatin powder, which I will do twice per day, once with each meal. And the utility of that is primarily for injury prevention. It's for tendon and ligament health, and it's just a preventative measure that I like to take. I'm just getting the distiller ready here, and I've got it preset to the amount of time that the pre-programmed app had just spit out based on the weight of the glass collection vessel. And you can see there now the fan is starting up, that it's all plugged in. It'll take a bit to actually start dripping out distilled water, but it's a set it and forget it option. And the outlet just makes sure that it doesn't run dry. So that's the meal prep right there, guys. And this is me just walking in once the beeper went off. Once I was notified via the Instant Pot, it'll beep 10 times. And this is just me following up and releasing the pressure here. And so what went into that Instant Pot was 350 grams or milliliters of distilled water, 135 grams of measured dry basmati rice, and then half of a pound of 93% beef. Probably the only person who is apparently crazy enough to opt for a leaner cut of beef in favor of actually getting more saturated fat from full-fat dairy, which has a greater ratio of saturated to monounsaturated fat than does beef. And that's just my preference, because saturated fat is, believe it or not, a systemic antioxidant. Very, very good for you, very healthy, very ancestrally appropriate and consistent. Now what you can see what I'm doing is I'm just transporting the cooked food into my glass dish. I'm a huge fan of glass and stainless steel, not only for eating out of, but also for drinking out of. The Instant Pot is great for myriad reasons, not the least of which is that you can cook on low pressure. You can cook at a lower temperature. It's perhaps 220 degrees. It's really optimal from the standpoint of nutrient preservation and also the mitigation of cholesterol oxidation. So frankly, I cannot think of a more consistent, healthier, and efficient way to prepare food. And it's something that I've been doing for over half of a decade. You know, I'm a pretty simple fella. I don't have great need for, you know, decorating my food and getting cute in the kitchen. You know, I'm a very pragmatic guy and cooking clean for myself, so I try to keep it as simple and straightforward as I can and as methodical and replicable as possible. I want every step in the sequence to make sense and be hyper optimized and efficient. So there's no wasted effort and wasted movement here. Again, I'm using the 1-2 punch of a 3% citric acid solution and distilled water. So the citric acid is designed to clean, to disinfect, to be an antimicrobial agent. And then the distilled water is simply to ensure that there's no residue left over. And I'm going to use a cotton towel to then dry out the pot. And of course, my tap water isn't filtered here. It's certainly not something that I would drink, but even in the context of dishes, it's something that you can dilute and mitigate the consequences of by spraying in some distilled water. So this is $150, $250 investment, depending on the brand that you opt for. And it's a very high leverage, high return on investment maneuver. You certainly don't want to be drinking tap water, and you certainly don't want to be relying on conventional filters that are not able to filter out birth control, for example, and other chemicals that are simply too small to be filtered out. So what I'm doing here is just going back in my fridge and I'm grabbing a glass of distilled water. And again, I'm prepping for my next meal. So the best time to clean dirty dishes is when they get dirty and not waiting too long. So I'm just putting back a glass of water here that I'm actually filling up with refrigerated distilled water. And I had used that just to measure out the 350 grams into the inner Instant Pot lid. And that's just going to serve the purpose of cooking my next meal. Here what I'm doing is I'm salting my beef. So each quarter pound of beef is going to be salted with 1/8 of a teaspoon of Redmond real salt. And I consume a 2-to-1 potassium to sodium ratio. Try to shoot for that as a bare minimum. I get about 4 grams of potassium per day and 2 grams of sodium. Here you can see just the ease with which one can peel an egg coming out of the Instant Pot. You can just see how seamlessly that egg peeling process is. A lot of people will rinse their eggs under tap water, and I've certainly done this historically, but what I prefer is to use my bottle of distilled water, which by the way is a high density polyethylene HDPE, that's for cycle number 2, bottle that doesn't leach endocrine disrupting chemicals from the inside into that distilled water. So you saw there, just did a quick rinse with the distilled water, just making sure there's no micro pieces of the shell remaining on there. And at this point, what I'm doing is just tossing those eggshells and getting ready to enjoy a very wholesome, very delicious, testosterone boosting, macro optimized meal. The macros for this meal, by the way, is going to be around 80 grams of protein, 150 grams of carbohydrates, and 40 grams of fat. This is truly the only meal that you ever need to master. You don't have to get cute in the kitchen. You don't have to decorate your food. You can literally just master this one meal. I'm grabbing my chilled whole milk out of the fridge, out of the freezer rather, and I'm just going to sit down and enjoy my meal here. Nothing better than a nice swig of cold milk. God, you probably see here, after I take a swig, just like a sigh of pleasure, expressing the pleasure that I've experienced. And this is a little bit of a side point. I like to start with my proteins first. You can see I'm eating the protein and fat from my hard-boiled egg here. And after that, what I'm going to be doing is consuming my beef. I've got 2 quarter-pound pieces of beef there. And then, of course, I've got a massive plate full of basmati rice. Eating the protein first will quell the glucose spike, which for those of you who are concerned about that, you will be appreciative of the fact that consuming proteins and fats prior to carbohydrates can actually minimize the spike that you get. But the most important in terms of health optimization, minimizing glycation of hemoglobin, minimizing the overall burdensome nature of excessive glucose, is to minimize the area under the curve of glucose. So I've been wearing a continuous glucose monitor and using the levels application with the Freestyle Libre sensor that this company can send you. And it's been showing an average glucose of in the high 70s, low 80s. And that's what's most important, your average glucose over time. So if you master this meal, you master the Instant Pot, you're set. You don't have to worry about food for the rest of your life. Like, this is incredibly valuable information that I wish I had known about when I got started on my fitness journey, on my self-actualization journey. I was eating out of a tiny dorm room, out of a mini fridge, using a toaster, consuming a lot of gluten, a lot of peanut butter, a lot of processed meets a lot of garbage. I hope this really helps you show how accessible healthy eating is. The fact that you don't have to be a master chef to put top tier food into your body. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions. I'm always more than happy to help. I know a lot of folks don't necessarily get along the greatest with dairy. Maybe you've got issues digesting it. You've got a lactose intolerance. Let me know and we can work around that to ensure that you're getting all of the micronutrients that you need so that you can live the life that you deserve. I love you. I appreciate you. And until next time, my friend, find your freedom. Peace.